Yes. Good evening, everyone. Hello, friends. I, Gennia Nuh, project lead for the Story Project 11 by www.tellmeyourstory.biz, welcome you to the second episode of the Letters from Santa series. The project Letters from Santa is addressed to parents and children. Though Santa is a mythical creation, most of us are blessed with the participation of our parents, especially the mothers in our life who look after us, take care of us, fulfill our wishes, and guide us in the right path. This project aims at providing insightful guidance and evoke interest in certain aspects of life that may shape the life of the children better. Today, I'm privileged to have with us Dr. Sourav Banerjee, Sutapa Basu, and Gayatri ma'am this evening, and we are going to discuss cultural leadership in children. Let me begin with introducing the panelists. Dr. Sourav Banerjee is an associate professor and the head of the Department of English of a government sponsored college affiliated to the University of Calcutta. He is also the Education Ambassador of the International Organization of Educators and Researchers, Philippines. He is a member of the International Advisory Board of the book series titled Post Humanities and Citizenship Futures of Rowman and Littlefield as well. Besides these, he is an editorial board member of Asia Pacific Journal of Advanced Education and Technology and the managing editor for TMYS Review, a biannual interdisciplinary publication. Sutapa Basuvam is an award winning author, poet, educationist, and writing coach. Her bestseller historical novel is Padmavati. Other books are The Legend of Genghis Khan, The Curse of Nader Shah, The Cursed Inheritance, and Princesses, Monsters and Magical Creatures. She has translated the 100-year iconic Thakumar Jhuli. Her ninth book, a non-fiction, The Birth of My Nation, was launched in 2022. Besides fiction, she writes poetry and short stories that have been published in Kafiana, When They Spoke, and many more. Her stories and poems have been published in textbooks for K-12 segment. Sutapa ma'am coaches aspiring writers, faculty, and children on educational and creative writing skills. Her awards are Best Fiction Award 2020 by Author Awards, nomination for Anupam Kher Award for Debut Novels 2017, first prize winner of 2016 of Times of India, Write India Campaign and Excellence in Publishing 2021 by the Public Diplomacy Forum. Moving on to Gayatri ma'am. She is a therapist and founder of Shama, a mind body spirit practice. She is an author, poet, mental health columnist, and a student and practitioner of Vajrayana and Buddhist psychology. So let's begin. I'm so sorry. I think there is some kind of an internet issue on Sutapa Basu ma'am's side. She has been disconnected. I hope she reconnects soon. So I'm starting off with both of you. So the first question that I have, oh yes, we have Sutapa Basu ma'am here. Yes. Welcome back, ma'am. So yes, I'll begin with the first question of the session. That is, how do each of you perceive cultural leadership and how do you push your cultural leadership ideas through your work? Shall I begin with Sourav, sir? Sir, you are muted.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for letting the gentleman speak first. This is one of a sorts. Well begun. So yeah. So your question. See now, if I have to begin, since I am beginning the session today, let me start by defining or by explaining what we understand by the term culture. Now, the term culture in itself is a very slippery one. There is the meanings of this word culture can be vast, varied, and versatile. So, on the one hand, I can say that it can be seen as a high level of taste and enlightenment resulting from extensive intellectual exposure to activities like literature, music, theater, fine arts, and so on and so forth. But it can also refer to the process of growing and studying bacteria or other cells in a laboratory for scientific purpose. So, if you say what is culture, how do you inspire culture in children, and so on and so forth. So, we have to understand what culture are we talking about. Now, forget the scientific aspect. Now, moving on, uh, actually, the first person to have used culture in the modern sense of being a whole way of life, if we take culture to be a whole way of life, the English anthropologist Edward B. Tylor, he was the first one in his book Primitive Culture. He had talked about culture being a whole way of life, and he had stated that culture is a tool, a powerful tool, I'd say, or rather, he'd say, a powerful tool of human adaptation and survival. Yet at the same time, it is a very transitory and a fragile phenomenon. So it is always in a state of flux, ever changing and easy to lose, and it exists only in our mind. Now you see that when we excavate places like let's say Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, we don't excavate their culture. What we excavate is like the buildings, the artifacts, the ruins, and from there we go on to construct the culture of that place. We kind of interpolate the culture of that place. So the pots and the ruins and everything, they help in uh, they help us in understanding what the culture of the place was at that time, as the things were made and in what way they were used and what purpose they were like used for. Now, I'll go a little bit theoretical for some more time. So let's say that there are three layers of culture. The first and the foremost uh, is that it is a tradition that defines our society. The second is that it is something that becomes part of our identity and is also a subculture. For example, we have the American dream and the American culture, but then we also hear about Chinese Americans and Mexican Americans and so on and so forth. And the third part is what something that is called the cultural universals, that is like acceptable and followed all over the world, like the use of verbal language for communication, classifying people on the basis of their gender, age, and having a sexual division of labor, having different concepts of privacy and a concept of good and bad, and so on and so forth. So if we think of all these things, then we understand that culture is, in this sense, a system of collectively held values. Now, I'll again quote Terry Eagleton. I'll not quote, I'll refer to him and say that he has said that culture lies less in what things are done, but rather more in how things are done. Like for example, let me talk about food. We all eat food. All human beings eat food. The moment we say that we eat meat, if we eat it in a raw format, we are uncultured. We don't. The community of people who eat raw meat are supposed to be uncultured. The moment we eat meat in a fine dining restaurant where we have all those embellishments and decorations, we become cultured. So it is not, as I said, it is not like what we do, but how we do things. Now, taking a cue from this, I will begin. I'll try to answer your question in the sense that, Genia, can I have the last part of your question, please?
Sure, sir. Means, how do you
Yeah,
push your cultural leadership ideas through your work?
yeah, of course. So, see, my cultural ideas, uh, the term my culture again strikes a bell. What is your culture? What is his culture? What is her culture? So, as I said, I have classified culture into so many compartments that there is no one culture. And to tell you frankly, I don't push my culture. Culture is something that is to be inculcated. Culture is not genetically imbibed or genetically inherited. It is rather imbibed. It's a social construct. It is imbibed. So what happens is that, as I said, that culture also refers to certain universals, universal ideas. So that is what I would rather inculcate in my students, inculcate through my work. That the first thing is that we need tolerance. If my culture or my system or value system or beliefs is not in or is not in sync with your system, I don't feel that my culture is the best one and your culture you should just leave and abandon and follow my culture. No, the first thing about inculcating culture in others is to make them understand that all cultures, no matter apparently how bad they look, have a deeper meaning and significance. And it is very important for every one of us, to kind of understand that culture, to respect that culture, and let us have that culture and diversity should rule. But then again, saying that, you cannot have everybody following a different set of culture in an organized sector like, say, education or office or college or whatever. There has to be certain universals. So you have uniforms, you have timings. You cannot say my culture is to attend college early in the morning at 6 a.m. Somebody says, no, my culture is not to attend college at all, I would rather be in the canteen. So you cannot allow that. So the very fact that you say that how I push it or how I inculcate it in my students through my work is asking them to be tolerant about others' culture, to follow rules, to have basic humanity and basic etiquettes. So if you follow these notions, if you follow these norms, you will definitely become a very cultured person. I will leave it here for the time being. I'll obviously come back to it when you ask me the other questions. I end with this. I hope I have answered your question.
Sure, sir. Sure. So, moving on to Gayatri, ma'am, if you could tell me how you see cultural leadership and how do you promote that through your work?
Okay. Thank you so much, Gennia, firstly for this lovely session, and thank you, Dr. Sourav Banerjee, for your wonderful, detailed sort of analysis and structured analysis of what culture is. I'm going to be far less so, so please excuse me. I wanted to tell you, give you more definition that was given by King Fere Fere, a Maori warrior who was coronated in 1858. And I think he was the first Maori king, if I'm not mistaken, after colonial rule. And this is something that the colonized cultures share in common. We have a deep sense of what we have lost, and therefore we have a deep sense of what culture is for us. So, how during his investiture, he said that culture is basically multiple groups passing through the eye of a needle, that eye of a needle being this current period in time. And we have to understand what that means for us in terms of law, in terms of education, in terms of religion, in terms of community, in terms of science, in terms of tradition. And we also have to understand what that leadership looks like, in each of these spaces. Um, so especially in the context of children, which we're talking about today, um, it's necessary to understand right from a young age what my beliefs are, firstly, where my beliefs come from, what identify with. It's also necessary to understand that other people do not hold my beliefs and do not come from the same place, even though we pass through the eye of the needle at the same time. you know though we occupy, I think each of us here, just four of us in this little space, have very different ideas of what culture is. Though we're on the same subject, we occupy the same time, we occupy pretty much the same space in terms of literature, thinking. The four of us itself cannot hold the same belief or the same belief system. So, how much more vast is that variation when we look at a whole country of people? And so, to essentially understand that as we rub up against each other, there is going to be a clash of ideas. And to have, I think, the best way to define what is desirable as we pass through that eye of the needle is, like the forest, the trees in the canopy. They each occupy the space they need for sunlight, but they leave a gap between each other. If the crown of the trees will never clash. There's always a very fine sort of a edge. And what King Fere Fere said eventually was, We have to enable our ancestors to walk with our children. And I think that is one of the most beautiful, you know, ideas of how we handle culture that I have heard of. For me, this is my effort through my work in terms of, I think there is this constant clash between the individual and the community, the past and the present and the future. So it is to help people, especially, and by my work, I mean both my therapy and my writing, is to help people understand as individuals that they each hold a place for themselves that is not incompatible with society, that is not incompatible with community. And it is possible, the more better defined your sense of self is, to also understand better where you stand in the community and to define the community by that sense of self. So that would be, how I see it. So I will pass the mic back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insightful uh, talk on the how you perceive culture. Moving on to Sutapa, ma'am. Ma'am, would you like to tell us how do you perceive cultural leadership and how do you uh, carry it or uh, make it work through your work? Oh, yes,
Thank you
that's
so
a
much,
double
Genia.
use of the word.
Yeah, thank you very much. Am I audible? Yeah. So
Yes.
thank you, Genia, for having me on this wonderful panel discussion. And thank you, Dr. Sourav and Gayatri. I think you have very clearly explained what is culture and all the nuances of it. So I'm going to just sum it up. I think that's all I'm going to do about what is cultural leadership. I have been working very closely with children for the last 50 years, teaching as well as creating educational materials and educational texts for them. So having been so close to children, and I'm talking about ages say 6 to 18 years old, I believe that cultural leadership is actually creative leadership because it utilizes the arts and it accesses creative methods and the open community space to educate and raise awareness about culture. So, cultural leaders have to be rooted in the community and committed to social justice. They could be very young and they could also be very raw, but they need to have a thick skin because and an unflinching determination and a love for the people that will make them bring about the change. At the same time, they will be able to take the blows that might even come from the community that they are wanting to change or help. So they are basically agents of social change, and they consider themselves social servants. They understand that to be a leader is also to be a servant. But more than that, they are reflective, they are wise and holistic people who understand that their life experiences, whether it is in a school, whether it is in a community, whether it's in the college, all that those experiences have to help them to convince others to bring about that social change. So I think that is, in a crux or in a nutshell, what cultural leadership is actually. Now, how do I sort of try to expose my young readers through my work? So, first and foremost, I expose young readers to diverse cultures through characters, cuisine, customs, traditions of the setting where my stories are. So, I've got these books for the young people here. So, like if you look at this book, which is called The Cursed Inheritance, it is set in Kolkata. So I have exposed to them the iconic hand pulled rickshaws of Calcutta, but at the same time I have also spoken about the sufferings of those pullers. So that is my exposure to them. Another example is, I have translated a very iconic Bengali heritage children's fiction called Thakuma Jhuli into this English translation called The Princesses, Monsters, and Magical Creatures. Yes, I can see Dr. Sourav smiling. So you know that this the original book was published 100 years ago. So obviously it has a lot of social context to the times, those times. So they will have attitudes, they will have societal norms which are very different from what we follow today. But I have tried to bring in, tried to make the young readers understand the traditions or customs of that time by something like, even queens had to go and bathe in a river or a pond because there was no running water in the palaces. So something like that. Another book, which is my latest, which is a non-fiction based on the history of India, which is called, The Birth of My Nation. I don't know whether you can see it. So here I have spoken about the Adivasi community, tried to make young readers understand who are the Adivasi community in India, and what is their place in our society, and how the state of Jharkhand was actually proposed for the Adivasis. So this is how I try to sort of bring in these social diverse cultures, especially of our country, because I think nowhere in the world will you find this kind of diversity that we find in India. And I try to bring that forward, expose my young readers to it. And I believe that that is a way to do it, because I would like them to understand, to hold their own views, their own opinions about these diversities. I believe that is the best way that they will embrace diverse cultures rather than preaching to them. So that is what my take is on it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was wonderful of you. Coming to the second question of the session, I would again pose the question for all three of you. What behavioral or intellectual choices in adults instill cultural leadership in children? And it will be very wonderful if you can means you can explain the question with life examples of yours. Starting with Sourav, sir, again.
Okay, this is a very interesting question. Thank you, Gennia. So, see, I deal with students who come to college. Maybe they're around 17, some are 18, so that range, and they when they leave, they're about 21, 22. So we wouldn't be calling them children as such, but we'd definitely be calling them young adults. They have already formed a kind of personality before they had come into this college, come into my college, or come into colleges. At the same time, they are still to be molded. They can be molded. They are very impressionable. So, it is very important. I am talking here in terms of my being a teacher in a college. So when I teach, there are certain things that we consciously have to follow. A college is not a place where we go, we teach, we evaluate, we put up the numbers, and students pass and they become graduates and they leave. No, the relationship between a teacher and a student does not end there. Once a teacher, always a teacher. So you know that when we meet our teachers on the road, in a mall, wherever they be, we kind of go up and talk to them, a bright smile on our faces. They are also very happy. That is also part of our culture. And why? Why do we do that? Why has it been such a norm? Not because that particular teacher had taught me Macbeth very well, or that particular teacher had taught me quantum physics very well and I remember the concepts till date. No, not at all. Not at all. I remember her or him. I respect him or her only because I recall him or her fondly because of what he or she had done to me as a student in terms of guidance. You won't remember what you were taught in class 5, 6, but you will remember what kind of fun you had, what fun teacher you had, what stories the teacher had told you. So the behavioral or intellectual roles in adults that instill cultural leadership in children is, one thing is that a leader is not supposed to tell you do this, do that. It is not the role of a leader. That is not a true leader. That is a boss. And you change companies because you don't like bosses, not that you don't like the work. So 90% of the people change companies, IT sector and other places where you have an option, is because you have bad bosses. You don't have a leader. A leader is a person who has a vision and a mission, and they are very clear, and he or she is able to explain that to the people he is expecting to do certain kinds of work in very simple languages. If that person is not able to make his followers or make the people under his group understand why he wants a certain piece of work done, then he has failed as a leader. So if you're talking about behavioral or intellectual choices, the first thing is that as an adult and as a teacher also, I'm saying that never give instructions. You do it because I'm telling you to do it. It is not like Vishwarup Darshan in Gita, that I have tried to make you understand through logic, reason, this, that, and after so many kinds of logic given, you don't understand. Then I show you that, open my mouth and show you that the universe is in my tongue and my mouth. So it is like you don't have a choice. I am telling you, so you have to do it. You are powerless. Do it. That is not a leader. That is not a leader. I'm sorry to say that that is not a leader. A leader will be able to make that person understand. So as an adult, remember, when you make somebody do something forcefully, what happens is that he or she might do it at the moment, but he or she might develop a kind of apathy for it. So what happens is that the next opportunity they get, I mean, they will not do the work. Given a choice, they will never do the work. So, and in children, especially because they're of impressionable age, they will kind of have a phobia for that. So it is very important for us adults to make the children understand that what the way that we are behaving, the way that we are explaining things to them, are in a manner that is acceptable to them, and which they follow will be for their good only. For example, if I tell you, if I scold a child for being late to class every day, he or she may feel bad about that. I have been a very strict teacher, definitely, in terms of discipline. And when the students are in the first semester, second semester, third semester, fourth semester, they kind of feel irritated by it. By the time they reach the fifth or the sixth semester, they come up and they have told me that, because you have been putting us through all these years, now we are organized and now we understand the value of it, and now we find that our work has become very easy. So when you have only one or two papers and you have to do group work, only one project, you don't need any kind of cultural leadership. That happens with the flow. But when you are disciplined, when you learn to be disciplined, following my example, that I tell them that, look, I don't carry my phone to class, I don't take calls while the class is on, so why should you do it? When I can show them these examples, when I tell them that I travel 50 kilometers every day to college and I can be on time, why can't you be on time? It is not scolding them, it is not insulting them, it is making them understand these problems. So I feel that these are the ways in which an adult should behave and intellectually influence a student or a child, so that he or she also becomes a responsible adult when he or she grows up, and not just give orders. That will be all.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, definitely. That's one way of putting it. And yes, I have also been instilled with the same kind of discipline just because my professors and my elders have set examples and I just follow them. Yes, that is very true. Now, coming to Gayatri ma'am, what do you think? What are the behavioral or intellectual choices in adults that help in instilling cultural leadership in children? And yes, you may cite your life experience, obviously.
Okay. Thank you so much for passing the question to me. I agree with Dr. Sourav in the sense of, um, from my experience, what causes the most pain in children is the hypocrisy of adults. And that hypocrisy or inauthenticity is when, adults say one thing and do another. And we'll see this everywhere around us. The children don't understand because they see children learn developmentally by mimicking. Okay, even just something as simple as a recipe that you and I may have learned from our mothers or grandmothers. It began, we have never seen a written recipe. We've been given little part tasks, grate the coconut, do this, do that, and we contribute and we watch, and so we learn an entire recipe that way. And that is how we pick up behaviors from those we learn from. So when children start, and so children are very, very observant, and when they see that you're saying one thing and doing another, that's when a sense of separation starts to begin for them. And Jiddu Krishnamurti said this once. He said that all separation of identity is violence. And that is the child's first experience of violence. inauthenticity, and hypocrisy. So I do agree in the sense of we have an obligation, as Gandhiji said, to be the change we want to see in the world. That is the first behavior of leadership. And see, none of us are flawless. We all make mistakes. We're all going to slip up. But to essentially behave with an authenticity, to own up to our mistakes, to admit our flaws, to be able to correct them, these are all things children are watching and learning from. But also, there's great hope. Roger Scruton, who's a great philosophical thinker, when he wrote about beauty, he said that essentially the ancients believed that all truth, all beauty, all art, all cultural aspects were a negation of conflict. Okay, nothing that comes from culture can end in conflict. This is a fundamentally ancient belief. Otherwise, we would not engage in it. It is almost like culture is the opposite of war. Okay, that's why he says that essentially, why do we engage with culture? We engage with culture because it is what allows us to stop destruction. So there is a vase that has been made in the 8th century. Why should it not just disintegrate into clay and pot, and it has some childish drawings that are irrelevant today? We have manufacturing processes that can make something, far more. Why should you preserve that pot? You preserve, so the cessation of destruction is a function of beauty. And that beauty, aesthetical beauty, I'm talking about, not just in terms of looks, is a byproduct, or rather a result of culture, and a result of cultural engagement. So, this is essentially what children learn when we are authentic, when we behave in ways that are culturally authentic, non hypocritical, when we behave with inclusiveness. If you look at any of the greatest leaders in the world, and we're talking about cultural leadership, Gandhi was a cultural leader, Martin Luther King was a cultural leader, a lot of the Indian chiefs who spoke of the need to respect land and climate and wildlife. Today, we think Chief Seattle, we remember their speeches, the Maori kings, our own Indian cultural heritage. This great attachment to land, to people, to preserving the rivers, the mountains, worshipping trees, sacred groves, animals, birds. No cultural leader is divisive. No cultural leader can be divisive. And if you essentially do not see the oneness of humanity, of the planet, of people through their diversity, you establish a sense of self, you establish a sense of individuality. Only when you're very strong in who you are you secure enough to see oneness. And children will pick up on that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Oh, that's very well put, very concretely put with very good examples. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, moving on to Sutapa, ma'am. Ma'am, if you would give your take on this particular question.
So I think both Dr. Sourav and Gayatri have beautifully explained, how embracing culture can come through role modeling, and what they see around themselves. So I'm going to here just give you one very personal example of this, very much from my life. I have, since birth and through marriage, I have been a part of the Defense Forces, an organization where the gamut of cultural diversities come together. So I have seen my parents, and my children have seen their parents, always attending prayers at a church, a mosque, a gurdwara, and a temple, because all these three places of worship are an integral part of every segment of the defense forces. So, we have equally and happily celebrated Eid, Gurupurb, or Onam, or Holi, you know, with equal fervor with everybody in the army, in the the defense forces community. So also, because we usually live in places scattered all over the country, sometimes very remote places. So our children and we have often mingled in a society which is very different from what probably we see at home. So what has happened is that the children of the defense forces have always become accepted these diverse cultures as a part of their life, as a part of how life goes on. So what has happened is embracing differences has been ingrained in them, unconditionally, unquestioningly, much before they've been able to formulate their own personal opinions. So, what happened then is that they have become natural cultural leaders. This is what is the consequence of that. So, I also believe that role modeling, what they see their adults, they see adults doing, at the same time, being in an environment where there is so much diversity will make them into natural cultural leaders. That's what my take is.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. That was a wonderful way of putting your take on this question. And obviously, that's a very natural process of instilling cultural leadership in children without forcing them to do it. Okay, now I will move on to a very individualized section where I would put different questions to the different panelists. So I'll start again with Dr. Sourav Banerjee, sir. Sir, you are currently engaged in imparting knowledge to the youth. You are also, means you do have a daughter. So what do you think is the role of women in cultural leadership? And how can the energy of the youth be channelized for the same?
The first part, I am currently engaged in imparting knowledge to the youth. I hope so that I'm doing it properly. The second part, yes, I am fathering a daughter, a teenage daughter at that. And believe you me, being the father of a teenage daughter is no mean task. Okay. And since we are talking about culture here, as I began by saying that culture is transitory, it's very fragile. So you cannot believe the cultural difference that we have. Like when my daughter says that he's sick, SICK, I assume he's running a temperature or having a cold and cough, but he means he's cool. Harry Potter, BTS, whatever. So like, uh, you get what I'm saying. So like, how do I father that child? Like, I'll tell you. So like, it's an anecdote. It's a joke actually. So this son gets a job and he writes a WhatsApp message to his father that, Dad, I got a job. And Dad says, lol, LOL. And the son says, Dad, what are you writing? I got a job. It's a celebratory moment. And you're saying this. Dad says, what happened? So he says, Dad, LOL means laugh out loud. Have I done something laughable? And the dad says, no, but I said lots of laugh, beta. So, I mean, that is how culture is diverse and how culture differs from not only place to place, but even from generation to generation. Now, so what you have asked is a very good question, that what I think is the role of women in cultural leadership and how can the energy of the youth be channelized for the same. So we have seen, I mean, history has shown us that the youth, they have tons and tons of energy, and if you cannot harness that energy into uh, something fruitful, and if you cannot harness that energy into something positive, society cannot progress in a good way. Like, so it is very important. The role of women in culture is that, again, when we talk about culture, culture is not something that is very tangible, as I had already said. It's intangible. Okay, so the role of women in cultural leadership, I mean, why are we even singling out women and I mean, discussing what role should women play in being cultural leaders? Women are already cultural leaders. It is like saying that I mean, women must be given equal rights to men. Why? Women are much superior than men, so they should be given much more respect than men are, or a position greater than men. Now, the role of women in cultural leadership is that it was well said that if you there's a Japanese proverb which says that if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But if you teach a man how to fish, you feed him for his entire life. Similarly, it is said that if you educate a boy, you teach only that boy. But if you teach a girl child, you teach an entire family because I mean she will be a mother, so that will be and the mother is the first teacher. So I mean culturally also the first things that we learn are the things that we learn from our mother, not from textbooks, not by reading, say, Raymond Williams or the likes. So it is from our mother. It is from our behavioral pattern. So it is very very important that women come out and take cultural leadership roles, and they be allowed to do so. It is not that tokenism should be there. Like we have panchayats where we have Lok Sabha seats or parliamentary seats and Vidhan Sabha seats where we have seats reserved for women. And now I'll just share an anecdote with your permission. So, like, we had gone for this thing, field work to one of the villages, and it was a female reserved this thing panchayat, yes, seat. So the panchayat pradhan was a woman rather. Sorry, I'm sorry. So whatever question were asked of her, she used to reply, "Ami jani na, shoshur baba jane." I don't know anything. My father-in-law knows it. And any question you ask her, that was the standard reply. So later it was found out that actually her father-in-law was the one who was contesting from that, and he was a panchayat pradhan for many years before that. But since the seat was changed to a reserve for a female candidate, he just passed the seat to his daughter-in-law. But ultimately, he was the one who was controlling everything. So that is not the kind of leadership that we are looking at. Not tokenism. They should be empowered to take decisions. They should be empowered to decide things, and we should all follow. And now let me tell you one more thing, that we talk about women empowerment, we talk about making women self-sufficient, and I mean in all senses of the term. That is good, that is okay, but are we also training the men folk to accept and follow these empowered women, or are they still in the middle ages criticizing and backbiting these empowered women? So the role of women, if you think of only women being empowered and taking on cultural roles will help, it will not help. You have to change society as a whole for women to be able to take up cultural leadership roles. And as for the youth, see, as the saying goes, you must catch them young. It is not like saying, okay, he's a small boy. If he's kicking somebody, let him kick. What does he know? He does not know good from bad. No, it is the right time. If he does not know it then, he will never know it. Now he's kicking somebody, and earlier when he grows up, I mean later when he grows up, be stabbing somebody. So the youth, it is not that the youth should only study. You go to the school or college, you do your homework, you come back, you submit your assignments, you get a good mark, and that's all. No, it is not like that. The youth should be made aware of the happenings in society. The youth should have their opinion. The youth should discuss their opinion. There should be regular debates, forums where these youth should be allowed to speak. I mean, they may have wrong notions, but you cannot correct them just by saying that, look, you're wrong, and what I'm saying is right, and therefore you should follow this. Not that way. There should be forums where they should be allowed to discuss. It is through discussion, debates, and meaningful conversations that they will learn what is right and what is wrong, and then only can their energy be harnessed, channelized for something meaningful, so that later, when they grow up, they become actual cultural leaders, and not just leaders who order around folks. So that would be my response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes. So, moving on to Gayatri, ma'am. Ma'am, one of the most important part of cultural leadership lies in the value systems that encourage spiritual collaboration and community awareness. You are deeply engaged in both these roles. Could you please share your experience as a medium of bringing change and inculcating these value systems?
Thank you so much, Gennia. That's such a important question, and thank you, Dr. Sourav, for your clarity with which you see the role that women and youth play, and thank you, Sutapa, also, for your immense experience with children. This is a complicated question because community awareness, the value systems of the spiritual as well as of community awareness can become problematic because we always know that society, there is, it's the role of the youth to rebel. It's the role of the elders or some elders who see themselves as taking the role as to impose. And this is where the clash comes about. Um, I work essentially with mind, body, spirit. Okay. And I work with trying to help people first align themselves inwardly and see that when they are aligned inwardly, the external will align to them. Okay. Why that is problematic for a lot of people is because sometimes you don't want the external to align with you. As I'm going to, cite Krishnamurti again here. Uh, to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is not a sign of good mental health. You should be disturbed by disturbances in society. So it's perfectly fine for that, for you to reflect with authenticity what is happening around you. People assume that alignment means I am never disturbed, I am always blissful, I'm always happy, I'm always optimistic, positive. That's not true. If there's injustice happening around you, you should be disturbed. Then only you are well adjusted. If you're perfectly fine with injustice happening around you, as long as it doesn't disturb you, you're not well adjusted. You cannot be. So we, I think the fundamental, this is something I try to bring out also in my work. Like my current book, that is Devi and the Battle of Megha is it's actually a modern story. It's not mythological, but it uses the Navarasas to help a young girl called Devi who's dealing with, a typical modern child who's alone at home while parents go to work. She goes inwards through traditional systems of, say, pranayam or meditation or self awareness, simply to go inside and realize that when your emotions are out of balance, in her world, Rudra is out of balance, that Raudra, which is anger. Okay. Now, what she realizes through the process of her journey, and there are times when she chooses to ignore it and say, why do I have to do all this, going inwards and setting myself aligned? It is that when you don't, it starts, when you're not aligned inwardly, it starts reflecting in the society around you, in the family unit, in your relationships with others. You might know that I used to be a journalist for 21 years, and I retrained and I became a counselor, and I'm continually training. One of the reasons that I made that change is because I realized that, there's a lot of chatter everywhere saying, oh, society is so hateful, there are trolls, there's this, there's that. You can't fix it until you fix yourself. It all changed, and this is something that Gandhi said, and we look at it as a cliche. Change begins with you. All change. Each person who has healed, they say a hurt people, but also a healed person heals people. So if you don't have anger within you, if you cannot be provoked to hate, if you cannot be provoked to animosity and enmity, that changes the environment around you. And therefore, the spiritual growth, and I'm saying spiritual growth in the sense of you don't really need to believe in God. Okay, you may not. You may, whichever God you believe in, whatever you believe in, you may believe, some people call it a higher power, some people just believe there's forces of the universe, some people don't believe in that also, that you're born and you die. That's perfectly fine. It has nothing to do with any, force or the name that you give to it or deity. You're free to believe everything, free not to believe in anything. But essentially, believe in yourself. The first principle is believe in yourself, believe in the inner alignment, believe in the holistic growth, believe in your own peace. Forget whatever else you call it, believe in your own peace of mind, believe in your ability to control your emotions, believe in your ability to create your own world. Yes, there are people who will come in and provoke you, right? Uh, but as we know, you need two hands to clap. And it's, you can't control what everybody else does, but you can choose not to be part of a mob. You can choose not to be part of a troll army. You can choose not to contribute harm to a situation. You can choose not to escalate the anger. You can be the force when we're talking about cultural leadership in children. You can be the force that says, you know what, this is getting out of hand, everybody just take a minute. Or let's get an adult into this. And we see it with youth all around us. There is immense peer pressure. There are toxic cultures everywhere, from masculinity to, we have young people newly thrown into the dating world. They don't really know the rules, they don't understand consent. You need young people to be very, very aligned with themselves to say, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel right, this feels violative. I do not want to get into these situations. I do not want to be imbibing things just because others around me. And peer pressure cannot be just shrugged off in that way. It's a very powerful force. We all do things because others do things. On one extreme, one end it's peer pressure, the other end it's the mob. So, where does your sense of understanding your own power come from? Your sense of leadership comes from. It's you're the person in the group that says, no, I don't want to do this. Thank you very much. I think I'll go and sit at home. And we need more of that, and that comes inward. So when you say what are the values that lead to community awareness, it seems contradictory, but your sense of self is your community awareness. Yeah, I hope that helps to clarify.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, coming on to Shutapa, ma'am. Ma'am, you have written multiple books, including children's books. Would you like to explain your approach? Like, do you tell this? This means, do you actually foster this motive that the good wins over the evil through your stories, or do you take a more neutral approach towards your characters and events, allowing the readers to decide what is right or what is bad for them?
Okay, Genia, first I must thank Gayatri. Gayatri, what you said was so wonderful and so much to the core of everything, I totally agree that children have to first get a sense of themselves before they can even think about the community and the society and so on. And I also, Sourav, I totally agree with you that, children, they must be allowed to make their own opinions, their views, and then they can decide. And believe me, I mean, I've been working with very small children. They really can differentiate between what is right and wrong, you know and we must leave it to their judgment. So to a great extent, that has been my basic approach when I've been writing for children. So like I just told you that, I try to sort of expose children to the culture, the history, the period, the society where my stories are set. First I do that. Now, there have been times when I've been in a discussion with other authors, and they have said, how do you deal with the fact that sometimes stories which are set in a certain historical period deal with patriarchy, we deal with misogynism, which is not, like, it is not acceptable today. So how I look at it is that I believe that children should know about what has happened in the past, because when they know about what has happened, they become conscious of how the society used to run, what were the traditions, what were the beliefs of those people. They will have a basis for comparison. They will know how much it has changed, and they will also realize that the society that they are living in, the world that they are living in, is much better than what it used to be in the past. So that is one reason why children should become aware, should become conscious of all these sensibilities which today we are taking so seriously. Of course, in my books, when I'm writing the story, especially when I did the translation, I have tried to dilute patriarchal ideas. I have tried to introduce themes of feminism, sprinkled, important values like friendship, like helping others, forgiveness, feelings of remorse, the good being rewarded, as you just said, and the evil being punished, but in a very passive and a non-didactic manner. conversations about rewarding the right, punishing the wrongdoer, the duties of a king towards his subjects, the duties of children towards their parents, something that we never get into, that realm. The duties are not only from the parents to the children, children also have duties towards their parents. So that is also something I have tried to interweave. Now, my approach in how I deal with these problems is I first build up the problem which is faced by the protagonist, possibly because he or she is a misogynist or has prejudices or is a very arrogant and domineering person. Then, because of that, they will go through various hurdles and obstacles, which they eventually overcome and come to the realization. They introspect and they realize that the problems were created because of their own personalities, and so they will try then to make up by, amendments to the victims, or they try to better their environment. And that is how I create a conflict zone, I resolve it, and then let the readers take the lessons of value from it without making any specific statements. That is my mode. That is how I approach the entire problem. So, for example, in my book, Princesses, Monsters, and Magical Creatures, my princesses are very bold, they're very wise, and they light up the darkness. And in the Birth of My Nation, I have added facts about lesser known and lesser sung queens who were wonderful rulers, and also about women freedom fighters. So, in that way, in a very passive manner, I have tried to bring in emancipated feminism into my writing. And I believe young readers are excellent at judging what is right, what is wrong, and I leave it to their judgments. My active interactions with children has proved to me that, and I have been designing a lot of educational materials for them, I've discovered that children have a far greater ability to think critically, to have discerning opinions than we give them credit for. So I do not believe that children should be blindfolded and prevented from knowing about the vagaries of life, because there are a lot of things that we think we are sheltering the children from, which are very prevalent in our society today. Let's look at gender stereotypes or sexist gender roles. It's very much there in our society. So what we should do, I think, is talk to them more about it, tell them stories about it, and then tell them, and through the stories try to show how unjust and wrong these attitudes are. I think that is the way they will get the tendency to display the right behavior and the right sensibilities. So that's what I believe, and that is how I work when I write the stories for children, for young readers.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, coming to the last question of the session. If you were a Santa, what advice would you give to a child so they can represent effective cultural leadership? I'll again begin with Sir.
Okay, so I'll keep this very short. So, like, if I was Santa and I had to give advice to a child so that he could become an effective cultural leader, I would say that the need for the hour, the need of the hour is compassion, humanity. So you see, as Gayatri ma'am was saying that children, we assume that children will revolt, and it is the duty of the children to revolt and the duty of the parents to kind of order them about, or the adults. So once we understand that it is not a fact that children don't understand anything, or we understand better than children in everything, and children also understand that the parents are ordering them about not because they are trying to control them, but because they feel that that is the way children should be brought up. So I would say that I'd say to a child that once you realize that you are tolerant, you can, before criticizing somebody else's culture, somebody else's beliefs, somebody else's tradition, you kind of know what is behind that belief, what is behind that culture, what is behind that tradition. You will find that there is nothing to criticize, and he or she or his practices is neither worse nor better than you. So I have always believed that if you train children in the basic etiquettes of life, you wouldn't need such glamorous programs as Swachh Bharat and such revolutions as feminism. Once you teach them in school that it is your duty to keep your surroundings clean, it is your duty not to discriminate based on gender, sex, or whatever, all these kinds of things will come to an end. And I mean, I forgot. I think Sutapa ma'am was talking about these gender biases being introduced into children right from the beginning, like gender-based toys, colors, pink for girls and blue for boys, guns for boys and Barbie dolls for women. And worse is the fairy tales. You will see that the girl is always brushing her hair, and she's described as the most beautiful princess in 7 lands. And what does the prince do? He is such an achiever, such an achiever. He can shoot arrows, he can throw spears, he can do a lot of things. So this is the concept that we need to change. You can protect children from certain things, but what you cannot protect them from is two things: advertisements and Bollywood. So there's no need to put the kind of blinders on the children's eye and believe that okay, they are not seeing bad things, so they'll be fine. It is not that. One of my panelists, I again forgot who it was, she rightly said that, rightly pointed out that children should be exposed to these things. So my advice to a child would be that yes, you have a right to see and know everything. Talk about it to responsible adults. Learn from them that it is good or bad, and then make your decision. Share it with your friends. Share it with your peers, and make informed choices. Do not make choices based on what you see on social media platforms. Those are all lies. If you follow social media platforms, you will find that everybody is more beautiful than you are, richer than you are, more happy than you are, and doing things that you never can achieve. So for a child, it is very necessary to differentiate between this make-believe world and the real world, not to fall for peer pressure, not to fall for the pressure that is being exerted by the parents. Like, I couldn't be a doctor, so I want my daughter to be a doctor. That is not done. That is not done, and you should not succumb to it. But I know it is easier said than done. But a child should have this kind of a focus that, look, if I want to do this and I know I can do this well, I will be able to do this. So let me try this out. Okay. So and also I would say that a child should also believe that it is not always that only once you start having gray hairs that you can become a leader. A leader is anyone who can inspire. A leader is anyone who can make people believe in certain ideas. So you have class monitors, they are leaders. You have group captains, they are leaders. You have sports captains, they are leaders. So it is not only that you have to become an MLA or a MP or whatever, a political position or a position of great, or the principal of a school to become a leader. Even children can be leaders. Whenever you find a group of boys or girls organizing a picnic, there still is a leader who decides what is to be what is to be the menu and where the venue is going to be. So all these are leadership. So if he or she can bring the 15 people together and decide a common menu and decide a common venue which is acceptable to all, he is doing a commendable job. So that is where leadership starts. And these things should be encouraged. Not that the parents will come in and they'll decide everything for the children and then say, okay, now you go. We have booked the bus. We have decided the venue. We have decided the menu. We have to talk to the caterer. So don't do that. Let the children decide for themselves. And yes, keep a tab on them. If you find that they are going wrong, correct them, make them understand that. And as a child, do not always think that since your parents or adults are saying something, you should revolt. And also do not think that you are not in a position not to make decisions. You are more than capable. Believe in yourself. That would be all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. That was a lovely advice to the children and lovely advice to us as well. Coming to Gayatri, ma'am, what would be your advice if you were a Santa?
Okay, thank you so much. It's hard for me to follow Dr. Sourav because he's summarized it quite well, with very balanced advice. And I'm all for Sutapa and Dr. Sourav's take on empowering children with knowledge, giving them the stories, giving them what they need to know, so that they can make their decisions. This question stumped me, I'll be honest, because Santa doesn't give advice as far as I know. So he's this nice, old man who shows up with gifts. But so I assume what you're asking is in terms of what is a gift that one would give a child in terms of um, direction to leave them with. So I'm answering it from that point of view. Um, I think very simply is, you have the power to build your own world. This, and always keep that in mind. If you sow neem, you will get a neem tree. If you sow sugarcane, you will get a sugarcane plant. And this is a sort of law of the world, which is, I think, somewhere what Santa represents, his bringing of gifts, naughty or nice, and you get a lump of coal if you've been bad. I think what he essentially symbolizes is this, that there is an essential principle of creating your own world. If you do good, you'll reap good. I know that this sometimes seems not true in the world that we occupy. That I've worked so hard, I've done so much, why have I not got it? Because there is also, and in that also, there is a lesson that there is an essential interdependence. We do not live alone, we do not act alone. Sometimes I may do something, but if I have not considered the environment around me, if I have not considered the people around me, if I'm not mindful of factors that influence my life, I think that is also an important lesson. And this is something that, I study Buddhist psychology. I'm a Vajrayana practitioner, and we take bodhisattva vows that essentially say, I will remain until the last person or the last being, not even the person. And a being can be a blade of grass, anything that is sentient, gains liberation. Uh, None of us can grow alone. None of us. So, when we say, oh, I worked so hard, but why did I not get all the result? It is because there are people around us also who need help, who need their capacity built up. Then, they give us, and then there's an interaction, and then we all grow together. No matter how high the stocks in the market grow, if there is an imbalance, there will be a market correction. Things will fall. So essentially, build your world. But build your world means build also the people around you, the beings around you. I'm not. I think it was Dr. Sourav who said that you are, or also I think Sutapa said that you are essentially a servant. To be a leader is to be a servant. That is also true. If we want to build our world, we also build all the people and beings in the world along with us. In fact, we build the world itself. We're seeing now with climate change, the kind of disasters that are happening around us. None of us will progress alone. So build your world, but build it consciously, build it mindfully, build it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was also a lovely advice. And yes, it's a gift of advice. Even if you say about physical gifts, it was a gift of advice from you as a Santa. So, yes, coming to Shutapa, ma'am, what would be your advice to today's children or to the current youth if you were a Santa?
So, Dr. Saurabh and Gayatri have given them so many gifts, actually, so many of them. So, I have just one small thing to say. I believe that I would tell a child as Santa, go out into the world and look for somebody whom you can help. The gift of fulfillment will be yours. That is all.
Oh, so well put, very concretely, very precisely, but very well put. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you all for the very insightful and the boosting conversation and for your time this evening. It was lovely having you all here, all here. And this past 1 hour has been an eye opener for many, and I hope so, because it has cleared. For me, the nuances of how culture is perceived by so many from different aspects. And it's like an amoebic idea. And you three, coming from various fields, from different fields, have done justice to this topic. Thank you so much, ma'am. Discussions such as these are necessary for the exchange of ideas and the betterment of the future generation. And once again, I end this session on a very, very good note. And for the viewers, tell me your story. Calls for submission on the story prompt, letters from Santa. Registrations are also open for the writing program season 9. We hope to hear from you. Till then, stay well, stay happy, stay together. Good night.